In the dark shadows and in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast, we are the brave and bold. The prehistory of the Mammoth Cave area has been of interest to archaeologists for more than a century because of the remarkable preservations in the dry cave environment. Beginning with the antiquarian search for mummified bodies in the early 19th century up until the most modern scientific research, Mammoth Cave has revealed important information about the Native Americans who lived near and explored these cave systems beginning more than 5,000 years ago. The interest in Mammoth Cave may have simply been human curiosity, but 3,000 years ago, Native Americans began mining several exotic minerals that form in the large dry passages. They left behind tools and other remains from this mining effort that has been important for understanding the beginnings of the first farming societies in eastern North America, and provides insight into their rural and ceremonial life. And by 2,000 years ago, that mining ceased, and the Native Americans do not seem to have returned to the cave in any large number, although other caves in the area continue to be visited for other purposes. This is the story of the archaeology of Mammoth Cave and what we have learned about its first Native Americans who explored its passages.
The Abracast, occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
This week is the week. Welcome to the Abracast, everybody. I will be your HAIC tonight. That's your head archaeologist in charge for this evening. I'm John Towers, of course. And I'm very excited this week. I'm revved up. We are, as you guys probably know already, but this week we are launching our limited series podcast. It's on a different feed, but you can find it most anywhere good podcasts can be found. We're not on Spotify with the American Sermon yet, or iHeartRadio, but we're working to get to. I don't know the rules about those places with these, so we're trying. But it's on iTunes, it's on Stitcher. It's on a bunch of pod catchers that I've never heard of before. So, hey, anyhow, I'm excited about it. I'm super stoked. This is the first time we've ever done anything like this. It's called the Abracast, the American Sermon. It's available, like I said, on iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, especially if you use something that it's not on, like if you are a Spotify listener and you're interested in the show, or an iHeartRadio listener and you're interested in the show and you don't want to get another pod catcher or whatever just to listen to it, it is also available on my regular YouTube channel. So you can go find it there. It'll be on more places as we go. I mean, it's on a lot of places. It's on like most places. We'll get on more as we're plugging along. I promise you. So you guys are like, well, what the heck is this American Sermon? I've heard you babbling about it all last month, and I'm excited to talk about it, and I'm happy to tell you about it, and we're going to talk about it. But first, we need to get moving on tonight's topic. First, I'm going to tell you the story that I discovered while doing research for an episode of The American Sermon. And I thought it was a fascinating story. So I saved it actually for this episode to kind of like lead into it. We are mostly working out of this like scholarly textbook. It's very mainstream. It's called, the feature book for the evening is called The Prehistoric Archeology of Mammoth Cave by George Crothers. It's also a way newer book than we are used to working out of. It was published by the William S. Webb Museum of Anthropology, University of Kentucky, 2017. And I'm also going to refer a little bit to this small article that I found on this subject on ancient-code.com, which is like an ancient alien site, but they did have some good info. I'll refer to that a little bit as well. So now is the time. If you're playing at home, if you're driving, I don't recommend you do this. Or if you're at work, probably this is not the best idea. Or if you're in the gym, for Christ's sakes, don't do it. Because you might throw up all over the place. But if you're playing at home, this is the time when I want you to summon your vessel of the art. Mine here is a mason jar, and I need you to adhere to the magical formula, the formula for the weapon of mass distraction. You guys all know what it is by now. So mix up your gin jihad and have a drink with me, and we're gonna go on a little ride tonight. A little ride through weird history of Kentucky. Oh, it's so good when it hits your lips. Sorry about the whole throwing up while you're working out thing. I've had a history of this. One time in basic training, I got smoked so hard I fucking threw up. Well, one time in basic training, I had a lot of problems in a foot locker inspection, and I had to do like 800 push-ups or something. It was some kind of crazy number like that, and I actually busted a blood vessel in my eye, and I was petrified because they were talking about recycling me, making me start all over again because I thought I had pink eye. And I'm like, I don't have pink eye, Sergeant. I know how to wipe my ass. You made me do 1,000 push-up, or whatever it was. It was some kind of crazy number. And then when I was wrestling, I used to be an indie pro wrestler, and you do these things called Hindu squats, which will just destroy you. But if you do enough of them, if you do like 800 of them at one time, you fucking will probably throw up. And I've seen that. So I don't know why I'm talking about that. I'm so excited. Okay, so here we go. Let's get into this. God damn. And you people that think you're in shape, go watch a YouTube video about Hindu squats. Go do a couple hundred of them. And fucking call me. That's not a challenge. Let me reframe. That's not a challenge. I'm saying if you would like a new, unique, not often used calisthenic, you should check out the Hindu squats because they're really good. Really, really good. In the bluffs along the... Did I mention this is Kentucky? Okay. Come on home to Green River. And in the coves and hollows that carve up the sandstone plateau of Mammoth Cave National Park, known as the Chester Upland, cave entrances and rock overhangs or rock shelters, rock lobsters, and love shacks can be found in abundance, where these natural shelters are suitable, dry and roomy with relatively level floors. Prehistoric Native Americans, ancestors of the American Indians, left numerous remains from their past activities. They built fires made stone tools from locally occurring chert. Chert is some kind of powdery rock or something, I think. Butchered and cooked game, animals, and fish that were abundant in the region, and gathered numerous plants for food and peace pipes, and to make tools or shelters, and occasionally buried deceased members of their group in these shelters. They also explored the deep passages and many caves. This is the story of what we know about these prehistoric cave explorers, how they used the deep caves, and about the archaeology that has helped piece together this story. Dr. Patty Jo Watson, who has spent a lifetime studying the prehistory of Mammoth Cave, the Mammoth Cave area, has called the Aboriginal people who once traveled the labyrinthian routes of Mammoth Cave and Salt Cave the world's greatest cave explorers. This is not an exaggeration. Beginning 4,500 to 5,000 years ago, the prehistoric people began venturing into the remote depths of the large, dry passages and several caves that comprise the Mammoth Cave system, bundling together dry river cane, weed stalks, and woody stems to make torches. They lit their way through the large passages and tight crawlways, leaving behind a trail of charred torch material and marks from their torches where they stoked them against the walls to keep them lit. Archaeologists have found evidence of this exploration upwards of 6 to 8 fucking kilometers. It's like 4.75 miles from any known natural cave entrance. So they're pretty deep in there. I would be very uncomfortable 5 miles into a cave away from an entrance. I would be imagine the amount of sticks and shit that they had to carry with them to burn. Wow. Logistically, it's crazy. You have to have like a supply train, maybe. It's always war for me, bros. It's always the tactical troop movements. Although some caves in other parts of the world were explored earlier and perhaps used more intensively, no caves show such deep exploration and intensive use as Mammoth and Salt Caves in Mammoth Cave National Park. Indeed, Watson once wrote, virtually everywhere we have gone in Upper Salts, whether via the main passage or routes through the breakdown, we have found plentiful remains left by Aboriginal cave explorers. However, it was not just the curiosity that enticed prehistoric people to explore Mammoth Cave. Beginning approximately 3,000 years ago, here we go. Are you starting to wonder what the fuck I'm talking about? Are you starting to be like, what the fuck is this guy talking about Mammoth Caves and shit? Beginning approximately 3,000 years ago, the minerals that form in some dry passageways, especially gypsum or calcium sulfite dihydrate, became of interest to these cave explorers, and considerable effort was made to remove them. This mining ended about a millennium later for reasons unknown to us. From 2,000 years ago to the first European American and African American explorers, can we just say American explorers? 2,000 years ago until the first Americans began exploring Mammoth Cave in the late 18th century, there appears to have been little or no use of these large caves by the Native Americans. Other caves in the region do show a continued use, but not in the manner of Mammoth or Salt Caves. It's a mystery. It's a mystery. Why were they exploring these caves? And then all of a sudden they were just like, you know what? Fuck off these caves. Fuck them. There was still mining to be done in these caves. We're going to see this. American settlers began filing land patents in Kentucky. many of them as compensation for military service during the Revolutionary War. So, as part of your payment, when you get conscripted or when you sign up for the Revolutionary War, part of the deal is sometimes you would get land out of it. Same thing happened in the Civil War. Like I believe, the story that I heard once on the internet was most of Ohio was actually given to Civil War vets. Ohio is why it's fucking crazy. So these caves and these properties included in the caves were very valuable. We're going to talk about why in just a second. Remember I said there was still mining to be done. It was full of cave sediments that could be used to make calcium nitrate. And you can convert that into saltpeter. They needed this saltpeter to make gunpowder. So the War of 1812 was looming. Or as it's called, as I call it, I'm sure I'm not the only one that calls it this, but the Revolutionary War Part 2 was coming up. And importing saltpeter became almost impossible because of British blockades on these naval sea routes. So these caves in Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia became very important for the sources of domestic nitrate. In Kentucky, leading up to and during the War of 1812, the mining of nitrate went from a cottage industry to an industrial scale business. Unprecedented amounts of nitrate dirt were dug up from these caves in large rock shelters. And with this digging, new discoveries of the prehistoric past also became a sensation. Here we go. I'm really milking it, aren't I? The trade in mummies. Desiccated bodies of prehistoric Indians found in the dry cave fill that was also rich in nitrate. It became a secondary reason for interest in the caves, one that would help launch a new business interest following the War of 1812. Tourism. It was the location of most of the mummies. The first well-preserved body, that of a very young child, was apparently found in Short Cave at 1811, just a few miles from Mammoth Cave. However, these remains were destroyed by miners, and I'm like, why would these miners destroy a mummy of a kid? Maybe they were superstitious and cowardly lot. Upon learning of the discovery, Charles Wilkins, he was the part owner of the mining operation at Mammoth Cave, he went down there and he offered a reward to the miners if they would preserve the next mummy they found. And indeed, a second mummy was found by the miners sometime between 1811 and 1813. I found a lot more 1813s than 1811s. Anyhow, here we go. She was found in a small stone crypt. So the body complete with short-cut hair. This hair was reportedly red hair. And it was a mullet, by the way. She was a party or a business in the front, party in the back kind of girl. Long fingernails and unblemished skin. She was judged to be that of a tall female. Get that? Tall female. More spectacularly, is she had been buried with her wardrobe, which consisted of 2 deer skins, a woven textile and coarse fabric, and a pair of woven shoes or slippers, a knapsack with a small side bag, both also made of woven plant material, and 2 bags contained a variety of personal items, including a small woven cap, bird quills woven together. They say, another source says these bird quills were actually like a headdress or like a hat. That's some bad hat, Harry. Several hundred strings of small beads made from seeds. String of fawn hoofs covered with red ochre. This is where she gets her name, Queen Fawn Hoof. I like it. I think it's magical. And here we go. There's more. She's got more fucking heavy metal stuff with her. Not just a necklace made of fawn hoofs painted red. She's also got a large bird talon strung on a cord, a bear jaw strung on a cord, 2 rattlesnake skins that she wears as boots. No, I'm just kidding. Just 2 rattlesnake skins, vegetable dye, animal sinew. That's like the tendons and shit that keep all your insides, joints and stuff together. 7 bone needles and a piece of deer skin with a hole for the thumb to be worn as protection for the hand. And 2 cane whistles. This mummy came to be known popularly as Fawn Hoof because of the necklace of red deer hooves found with her. Or at least two other mummies were found in Short Cave. 1814, one ended up in Scudder's Museum in New York, later purchased by P.T. Barnum, which was subsequently destroyed by fire in 1865. The second may have been sent to the museum at Cincinnati, but it was also reported to have been destroyed in a fire prior to 1844. One mummy was also reported to have been found by saltpeter miners in Auburn Avenue area of Mammoth Cave in 1814. And what of Fawn Hoof? What of the ancient queen of the Kentucky cave lands, you might ask? Researchers at the Smithsonian examined the mummy. They dissected it and reported their findings. And at some point after that, would you guys like to guess what happened some point after that? Would you like to guess what happened some point after that? Anyone? You want to hazard a guess? Dun, 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 dun. At some point after that, the Fawn Hoof mummy was completely lost by the Smithsonian Institute. Have you guys ever heard of this Fawn Hoof mummy? Have you guys ever heard of this tall queen of the Kentucky caveland mummies before? I never heard of this before. When I stumbled upon it, I was fascinated. But the story of the mummy, the story of Fawn Hoof does kind of end here. However, we are going to talk a little bit about the caves. We're going to carry on. We're going to yammer on for a little bit about these caves because there's still some interesting stuff. This guy he talks a little bit about initiation and rites of passage and poop and stuff. So we're going to get back into this for just a minute. But just hold on to that Fawn Hoof stuff. Tall, red-haired female buried in a cave 5,000 years ago or whatever. All right, so their radiocarbon dates from these salt caves excavations span from like 2,520 years ago to 4,060 years ago. My God, that's crazy to me. It's like before Jesus was walking the earth. So let's talk about why these caves are so special. Caves have special significance in many cultures. They can be foreboding. Fuck yeah. Remember in Empire Strikes Back when Luke goes into that cave in Dagobah and mother bickety bam, fucking Darth Vader was down there. It was all Jungian psychology, but it was pretty shocking when I was a kid. They can be foreboding and perpetually dark underworld, and cave formations can be exotic and phallic. Very sexual. Caves are very sexual. Fantastic creations not found in the everyday above ground world. When you enter a cave, you descend into the unknown. When I was a kid, my folks would take me to I think it's called Nelson Ledges, which is funny because one of my best friends' name is Nelson Pyles. So I'm getting the two mixed up. But they have a cave. They have like a cave in Nelson Ledges called the Devil's Icebox. When you walk into this cave, and no matter how hot it is outside, it's fucking freezing cold because of the way those rock traps temperature. I don't know. I haven't thought about that in years. I don't know what I'm talking about it now. I'm chatty tonight, aren't I? You descend into the unknown, and when you emerge, you return to a world of light. One cross-cultural use of caves and cave-like structures is for secret or exclusionary practices, including male initiation ceremonies, which we don't have in our culture. We should get some cave-dwelling male initiation ceremonies. We should get some of this. I mean, there's Freemasonry and all this. We talk about that. There's like Thelema and ceremonial magic. We could talk about that too. I have suggested that the Mammoth and Salt Caves were used to seclude young boys from the rest of society and to initiate them into the fraternity of adult men. Medicinal salts used as laxatives in the cave physically purge the initiate. A literal and symbolic art of cleansing and preparing him for the next stage of life. I'll tell you what, I got prepared for my next stage of life today. I ate lunch at Subway, and I think the bitch at Subway fucking poisoned me because, like, I blew a gasket. I opened up, like, the Scarlac pit. It was terrible. An initiation ceremony after the American sermon is not like this, by the way. I've kept myself on a very short leash over there. The initiation ceremony after a period of seclusion during which the initiates learn the ritual knowledge they will need as adults. They are reintroduced to society wearing new clothing, body decoration, genital mutilation, exhibiting, bodily mutilation signifying their new status. The reintroduction ceremony may include performance of ritual dances and singing. Well, that's a new one. Songs learned while in seclusion. Gypsum could have played a role as body paint or some other forms of personal adornment used in such ceremonies. Fantastical crystal forms of gypsum may have had significance as amulets, or powdered gypsum may have been imbued with mystical power. An important substance carried throughout life and occasionally replenished when necessary. The important point is that gypsum found only in certain cave contexts identifies this person in the possession of it and having obtained that status as being a full adult and a member of society. So I think that's what he's talking about, where he says it might be exclusionary. Well, it's also gender exclusion, but I think he's saying like the dudes that were cool enough to do the seclusion in their rituals in this cave have this gypsum to have. And it's kind of like a black card. You know what I mean? It's kind of like a status symbol, maybe. I think that's interesting, right? What do you think about that? All right, at the top of the show, we're just going to skip ahead here a little bit. At the top of the show, we mentioned that in the Mammoth and Salt Caves, it seemed, at least the Mammoth Cave, it seems like these, what do they call them, Aboriginal people, or like the ancestors of the Native Americans or the American Indians. He said a bunch of different things up front. But he mentions that at some point they withdrew from these caves and they stopped exploring them. But they did continue to explore other caves in the area. So the mystery is like, why was this cave abandoned? And he never really answers that, but he does say, I mean, he never really answers it if you really think about what he said at the top. But he has this broad brush that he paints here, where he says, I suspect new forms of ritual, possibly centered at these impressive earthwork sites. So we've, on the American Sermon, in the 0 episodes, we've mentioned mound builders. Especially in my part of the country, we had like a mound building culture. So he's saying that new forms of ritual, possibly centered at these impressive earthwork sites, began to eclipse caves as ritual places. Caves continue to be used in other important ways, however. During and after the early woodland period, perhaps the most widespread use was a mortuary site. The Salt Cave vestibule was used for special kinds of mortuary processing in many areas of eastern North America. Pit caves with vertical openings to the surface were also used as mortuary sites. I don't know if I would call them mortuary sites. They just threw bodies. Bodies were dropped into these shafts, and they were often, they threw the personal artifacts and their fucking peace pipes and stuff, and their puka shell beads and stuff down there with them. And all the bodies just sat at the bottom of these big vertical caves. There are pit cave sites known from the Mammoth Cave area. It was an especially common use in the caves of southwest Virginia during the late prehistoric period, 400 to 1,000 years ago. Another quite widespread activity in caves was drawing images on the walls and sometimes the ceilings and floors. While prehistoric petroglyphs or pictographs can be found in Mammoth Cave and Salt Cave, they are not common, and it seems to be isolated, individually inspired acts of expression. The drawing of images, however, including geometric, animal, human, and fantastical creatures, was an exclusive activity in some caves. One of the best-known sites is called Mud Glyph Cave because the images were drawn into soft mud that coats many of the walls. The intensive use of caves as locales for creating rock and mud art is almost exclusively a late prehistoric phenomenon, 400 to 1,000 years ago. Prehistoric use of caves as mortuary sites and art galleries is not evident in Mammoth or Salt caves. Archaeologists do not know why, but apparently they were not deemed suitable for these purposes by those Native Americans. See, we're wondering why these two caves were singled out not to be used. They're saying caves all over the other areas around were used for these things, but not these two. After a certain period, these two were left. I think whether it's, Fawn Hoof or not, like whether it has anything to do with Fawn Hoof or not, I think it's, at some point in time, these people were traveling 5 miles into this cave system to explore it. And eventually they were just like, you know what? Fuck it. Don't ever go into this motherfucker again. We're done with this motherfucker over here. They continued to live in the region, but it was these cave systems were not deemed suitable for these people. Perhaps the history of extensive mineral mining and the stories of the ill-fated miners who lost their lives. I cut that out. There were some mummies, some dead bodies found in there where rock ledges fell down on to some of these dudes and crushed their arms and pinned them and all this other kind of stuff. They were places to avoid because they were dangerous, high voltage. Even though archaeologists have learned much about the world's greatest prehistoric cave explorers, the caves themselves still hold many secrets. Hey guys, it's John here. I wanted to tell you guys about our new limited series which launched this month. It's called The American Sermon, the Occult Foundations of the United States. And if you dig this show, then you'll love it. You can find it right now on Stitcher, on iTunes, on Spreaker. It's on handful of other podcatchers while it's just launching. If you're having a hard time finding it on your podcatcher of choice, you can go to abercast.com, and it's streaming right there live. We are also launching our first ever contest. It's called the Vessel of the Art Giveaway. And it's this fine glass mason jar with the Abercast logo on it. There'll be some other swag in there for sure. Maybe I'll throw in a book. Some other I got some other stuff kicking around the studio here. The next time you apply the formula for the weapon of mass distraction, you can whip up your Jin Jihad in this sweet ass jar. I'm very excited about this. What do you have to do to win? Well, it's easy, bros. Check this out. All you have to do is leave a 5-star review, not just a 5-star rating, a 5-star review for either the Abercast or the American Sermon. Or hey, I don't know, increase your chances. Do both. On iTunes. It's got to be on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, whatever it's called nowadays. You have to take a screenshot of it and throw it in Instagram. You have to tag at least one friend who you think might like the show and do a hashtag Vessel of the Art. And you also have to tag me, Stigmata Studios, in Instagram. Don't put it up on Twitter or anything. I'm just paying attention to Instagram right now. So tag me, Stigmata Studios. The winners will be announced in March's Gin Joint. And you're like, well, what the fuck is a gin joint? Well, here we go. Starting monthly on Facebook, on the Abercast Facebook page, every Wednesday of the full moon. So either whether it's before the full moon or after the full moon, whatever week that the full moon is going down on, we're doing Facebook Live called the Gin Joint. It's like a get together. We'll come on, we'll talk some shit together. We'll fucking do some stuff. Maybe we'll do some readings, trade some stories. I don't know. Anyhow, so come and join us on this Gin Joint, and we'll go ahead and give the first winner of the Vessel of the Art giveaway on March 20th. There'll be another one on April 17th. And we'll see how those two go before we start scheduling more of them. But all you got to do is go to the Abercast Facebook page and catch us there. It'll probably also simulcast either on Instagram and the Instagram stories. So you might want to go ahead and follow me on Instagram, Stigmata Studios. And also, for the shits and giggles of it, you might want to follow the Abercast YouTube page because it might be simulcast there. I got a couple cameras. I'm trying to figure out the best way to use them both, but they'll definitely be on the Facebook page. So go ahead and go find the Facebook page, like it, and catch me outside. How about that? On March 20th, the world's first gin joint. And we'll be discussing and picking the winner of the Vessel of the Art giveaway. And then again on April 17th. Okay. Go to abercast.com, sign into the mailing list for some bonus material, bonus graphics and stuff. And then also, one last thing. A notification. We have shut down our Patreon. We have shut down our Patreon in the interest of fighting techno censorship across the galaxy. So we're away from Patreon. So if you guys are looking for a way to support the show financially, the best thing to do is send donations to the PayPal link that's in the show notes or on the website or whatever. All right, thank you. Enough of this. Enough of it. Thank you. So, John, what is the American Sermon? Well, about a year ago, about a year and a half ago, I did a 2-part episode thingy on this book, post-World War II book on it, by Manly P. Hall called The Secret Destiny of America, which had a bunch of cool things in it about, it's sort of like, it should, instead of The Secret Destiny of America, I think it should be called The Secret Origins of America. But then, like, a year ago, a little over a year ago now, I did Freemasonry February, where I did like 4 or 5, maybe 6, I don't know how many ever episodes, all about Freemason stuff. And those 2 specific topics got my wheels turning on this stuff about, like, all the weird stuff. You know, it's like the foundation of a building. It's like if the United States is a building, okay? So those 2 topics started me thinking about all the weird and offbeat and sometimes sinister stuff that gets mixed into the foundation of that building. And about a month or 2 ago, I started working in earnest. Well, at first it was actually going to be a series for this show that I could just stretch out. You know, do like 1 episode a month on it for a few months, and eventually it stretched into this own, like, this limited series thing that's going to be all, like, on its own deal. So, to prep the show and to get stuff on the RSS feed that I could start submitting to the different podcast apps and so forth, I recorded 3 episodes, which really started the sermon off really, really good. In the American Sermon, 3 stories from the Secret Destiny of America. I revisited some of the stories that got me going for Manly P. Hall's book, The Secret Destiny of America. We talked about the weird sort of New World Order role that Hall saw America taking post-World War II, and we also talked about the surprising historical character Hall thought was the first Democrat, and that's small d, by the way. And this is it's a cool revelation. But he also went over this idea that Hall had about there being this secret society of, like, invisible philosopher, not physically invisible, but they, like, work behind the scenes to steer history into the founding of, like, this, this experiment of the founding of America. And one of the stories, there was this anonymous patriot that gave this speech to encourage the signers of the Declaration of Independence. Here, we're just gonna play a clip. We're gonna play a clip of the 0 episode here. Of course,
on July 4th, 1776, at the old State House in Philadelphia, a group of patriotic men were gathered for the solemn purpose of proclaiming the liberty of the American colonies. From the letters of Thomas Jefferson, which are preserved in the Library of Congress, I've been able to gather considerable data concerning this portentous occasion. In reconstructing the scene, it is well to remember that if the Revolutionary War failed, every man who had signed the parchment then laying on the table would be subject to the penalty of death for high treason. This is why the founders said that they pledged their lives, their treasure, and their sacred honor for the revolution. It should be also remembered that the delegates representing the various colonies were not entirely of one mind as the policies which would dominate the new nation. They were crazily not of one mind. There were several speeches in the balcony. Patriotic citizens crowded all available space and listened attentively to the proceedings. Jefferson expressed himself with great vigor, and John Adams of Boston spoke with great strength. And the Philadelphia printer, Dr. Benjamin Franklin, quiet and calm as usual, spoke his mind with well-chosen words. The delegates hovered between sympathy and uncertainty as the long hours of the summer day crept by. For life is sweet when there is danger of losing it. The lower doors were locked and a guard was posted to prevent interruption. According to Jefferson, it was late in the afternoon before the delegates gathered their courage to the sticking point. The talk was about axes and scaffolds and the gibbet, when suddenly a strong, bold voice sounded. "The gibbet, they may stretch our necks on all of the gibbets in the land, and they may turn every rock into a scaffold, and every tree to a gallows, every home into a grave, and yet the words on that parchment can never die. They may pour our blood on 1,000 scaffolds, and yet from every drop that dies the axe, a new champion of freedom will spring into birth. The British king may blot out the stars of God from the sky, but he cannot blot out his words written on that parchment there. The works of God may perish, his words never. The words of this declaration will live in the world long after our bones are dust. To the mechanic in his workshop, they will speak hope. To the slave in the mines, freedom. But to the coward kings, these words will speak in tones of warning that they cannot choose but hear. Sign that parchment. Sign if the next moment of the gibbet's rope is about your neck. Sign it the next minute. This hall rings with the clash of falling axes. Signed by all your hopes in life or death, as men, as husbands, as fathers, brothers. Sign your names to the parchment or be accursed forever. Sign, and not only for yourselves, but for all ages, for that parchment will be the textbook of freedom, the Bible of the rights of men forever. Nay, do not start and whisper with surprise. It is truth. On your own hearts witness it. God proclaims it. Look at this strange band of exiles and outcasts suddenly transformed into a people. A handful of men, weak in arms, but mighty in God-like faith. Nay, look at your recent achievements, your Bunker Hill, your Lexington, and then tell me if you can, God has not given America to be free. It is not given to our poor human intellect to climb to the skies and go pierce the counsel of the Almighty One, but methinks I stand among awful clouds which veil the brightness of Jehovah's throne. Methinks I see that recording angel come trembling up to that throne and speak his dread message. Father, the old world is baptized in blood. Father, look with one glance of thine eternal eye, and behold evermore that terrible sight. Men trodden beneath the oppressor's feet, nations lost in blood, murder, and superstition, walking hand in hand over the graves of victims, and not a single voice of hope to man. He stands there, the angel trembling with the record of human guilt, but hark, the voice of God speaks from out of the awful cloud. Let there be light again. Tell my people, the poor and the oppressed, to go out from the old world, from oppression and blood, and build my altar in the new. And as I live, my friends, I believe that to be his voice. Yes, Were my soul trembling on the verge of eternity? Where this hand freezing in death? Where this voice choking in the last struggle? I would still, with the last impulse of that soul, with the last wave of the hand, and with the last gasp of that voice, implore you to remember this truth. God has given America to be free. Yes, I sank to the gloomy shadows of the grave. With my last faint whisper, I would beg you to sign that parchment for the sake of those millions whose every breath is now hushed in intense expectations as they look up to you for the awful words. You are free.
All right. Oh, wait, hold on.
The unknown speaker fell exhausted into his seat, and the delegates, carried away by his enthusiasm, rushed forward. John Hancock scarcely had time to pen his bull's signature before the quill was grasped by another. It was done. The delegates turned to express their gratitude to the unknown speaker for his eloquent words. But he was not there. It was the strange man who seemed to speak with divine authority, whose solemn words gave courage to the doubters and sealed the destiny of a new nation. Unfortunately, nobody knows.
Okay, now, in the American Sermon, the Zero episode, one of the other Zero episodes, the American Sermon, the Promised Land, Giants, and Manifest Destiny, we look at, just like Fawn Hoof here, at some old stories of these giants in ancient America, and we trace these giants from the Promised Land, from the Old Testament to the Promised Land in what would become the good old USA. Here's a clip from that.
I gotta lube up because there's some rain here. This is called an account of the history. It's a war story. We're in for a war story. An account of the history, manners, and customs of Indian nations who once inhabited Pennsylvania and the neighboring states. 1819 by Reverend John Gottlieb Ernestus Heckwelder. The Lenni Lenape, according to legends handed down to them by their ancestors, resided many hundreds of years ago in a very distant country in the western part of the American continent. For some reason I do not find accounted for, they determined on the migrating to the eastward and accordingly set out together in a body. After a very long journey, they fell in with the Menengwe, which are Iroquois, who likewise immigrated from a distant country. Their object was the same as that of the Delawares, who were proceeding along to the eastward until they would find a country that pleased them. The spies, which the Lenape had sent forward for the purpose of reconnoitering, had discovered that the country to the east of the Mississippi was inhabited by a very powerful nation who had many large towns built on the great rivers flowing through their land. These people, as I was told, called themselves the Telugu or Telugu. Colonel John Gibson, however, a gentleman who has thorough knowledge of the Indians and speaks several of these languages, is of the opinion that they are not called Talagawe, but Alagawe. It would seem that he is right, from the traces of their name which still remain from the country. The Allegheny River and mountains have indubitably been named after them. The Delawares still call the former Allegawe Sipwe, the river of the Allegawe. Many wonderful things are told of this famous people. Lenni Lenape eventually came into contact with the ancestral race of the Allegheny or Allegawe people. The race even greater in stature than the Lenni Lenape and known for their massive earthworks throughout the regions of Lake Erie and Lake Huron. Heckwilder continues. They are said to have been remarkably tall and stout, and theirs is a tradition where there were giants among them, people of a much larger size than the Lenape. It is related that they had built regular fortifications or entrenchments. I've seen many of these fortifications said to be built by them, two of which are particularly were remarkable. One of them was near the mouth of the River Huron, which empties itself into Lake Sinclair. On the north side of that lake at a distance of about 20 miles northeast of Detroit. The other works properly entrenchments, being walls or banks of earth regularly thrown up with a deep ditch on the outside, were on the River Huron east of Sandusky. This is like where Cedar Point is. About 6 or 8 miles from Lake Erie. Outside of the gateways of these entrenchments were a number of large flat mounds in which the Indian pilot said were buried hundreds of slain Allegawe. When the Lenape arrived at the banks of the Mississippi, they sent a message to the Allegawe to request permission to settle themselves in their neighborhood. It was refused them. They said they had to build a wall. But they obtained leave to pass through the country and to seek settlement further eastward. They accordingly began to cross, but when the Allegawe, seeing their numbers were so very great, and in fact consisted of many thousands, they made a furious attack on those who had crossed, threatening them all with destruction if they dared persist in coming over to their side of the river. Fired at the treachery of these people and the great loss of men they sustained, the Lenape consulted on what was to be done, whether to retreat in the best manner they could or try to strengthen and let their enemies see that they were not cowards but men, and too high-minded to suffer themselves to be driven off before they had made a trial of their strength, and they were convinced that the enemy was too powerful for them. You see what I'm saying? This sounds real familiar, Pilgrim. The Menengwe joined the war. When the Menengwe, or Iroquois Indians, saw that the Lenni Lenape were losing the battle, they agreed to fight on their side in exchange for a promise that they would have a part in jointly ruling the conquered land east of the Mississippi. The Allegawe were finally defeated, and it was said that they fled south down the Mississippi River, never to be seen again. Again, Heckwilder continues. The Menengwe, who hitherto had been satisfied with being spectators from a distance, offered to join them on the condition that after conquering the country, they would be entitled to share it with them. The proposal was accepted, and the resolution was taken by the two nations to conquer or die. Having thus united forces, the Lenape, the Menengwe declared war against the Allegawe, and the great battles were fought, for which many warriors fell on both sides. The enemy fortified their large towns and erected fortifications, especially for the large rivers and near the lakes, where they were successfully attacked and sometimes stormed by these allies. The engagement which took place, which hundreds fell, and who were afterward buried in holes or laid together in heaps and covered over with the earth. No quarter was given, so that the Allegawe, at last finding that their destruction was inevitable if they persisted into their obstinacy, abandoned the country to the conquerors and fled down the Mississippi River, from whence they never returned. Imagine how fucking heavy metal this scene was. To me, it was like these tribes of Native Americans or American Indians or whatever you want to call them. I see them creeping through the green woods with their moccasins and their war paint on, tomahawk in hand, or bows and arrows drawn and at the ready to count coup on these giant assholes. And in the morning mist, and they start their war cry, and they attack, and there was the vicious battles, and afterwards their survivors proudly emerge from the smoke of the battle, and with scalps of red-haired giants and necklaces made of their double rows of teeth and jaws, watching those who surrendered fleeing westward towards the setting sun. This is the direction that they just came from. Whatever awful event is pushing them away, they are sending these survivors of their war, the surviving enemies of their war, they're sending them to go face whatever destruction all three of these tribes were fleeing. I think that's crazy. But the craziest part, bros, way to leave me hanging. We explore this idea that one of the reasons that God created the Hebrews were to kill these giants that lived in Canaan and to take their land. And we talk about the population displacement from these promised lands by the Hebrews and by the Native Americans and ultimately by the United States government. In the next Zero episode, the American Sermon, I believe it's going to be called The Grand Pontiff and the Grand Master of All Symbolic Lodges. However, that's not locked in stone yet, but I think that's what it's going to be called. You'll be able to find it. It will be like the third thing on there. We acknowledge the Freemason influence to the founding of the United States, and then we try to prepare ourselves for dissecting this weird, it's always weird and it's always blasphemous stories and mythologies of the Freemasons from their own texts. And this is not texts from like, Lynn Pinkett or whatever, or Knight and Lomas. This is not texts from, this century. It's not text from the last 30 years. This is not new History Channel fucking TV show sources. Like, this is from old shit that I found, right? Yeah, so, let's talk about it. We're talking about dissecting the weird and sort of blasphemous shit in the stories and mythology of Freemasonry from their own stuff. All right, here we go. By all this Lucifer business and morals and dogma, especially specifically in this chapter. But you have to look at the context of what this chapter is talking about. And this is not about all the other chapters. This is not about all the other degrees. I specifically chose this one because it fits perfectly. So the red flags go up everywhere when you start reading this. If you come at it from a dogmatic point of view, right? The teachings that there is only one way to heaven, and it is through the risen Jesus Christ. It's not what the Grand Pontiff drama here is teaching Philetus. The philosopher is being instructed by a Greek god, he probably represents Gnosticism, by the way. Not to get too far into that. He's probably representing Gnosis, or at least pre-Christianity Gnosticism, which is called Hermeticism. If you want to go on the feature topic link, there's tons of Gnostic episodes on there. We get into Gnosticism a lot. But he's instructed by this Greek god who probably represents Gnosticism, and he teaches him not to be afraid of the great deity, but goodness and truth is the way to heaven. And the Hindu teaches him that good works are the way to heaven. And John the evangelist teaches him that, I can't remember how I did his voice, that the religions and the creeds do not matter, and the gods of the Jews, Christians, and Islam are one, all infinite continuum. Again, this sounds real good to us nowadays, but the coexist bumper sticker crowd. This sounds real good to the coexist bumper sticker crowd, but to the devout religious, this is heretical. This is heretical to Christians. This is all the First Corinthians stuff. This is all that First Corinthians stuff was preaching about. This is heretical to the Jews, and this is violently, I would hazard to guess, violently heretical to Muslims. But we are not done. The drama unfolds further with a vision. And then everyone wakes up and they grant the title of Grand Pontiff to Philetus here. And just to circle back and put a pin in it, the Grand Pontiff says, Melchizedek, the son of Salem, the priest of the Most High God, met Abram in the valley of Sheva. So what they're talking about, what he's talking about, I call it World War Zero. It's World War Zero. It's after God tried to kill the whole world, and when he came back, because after the flood he disappeared for a few generations, and then when God came back and he saw Nimrod building this Tower of Babel, he freaked out. And there's actually a Bible passage. It's like, I don't know, Genesis maybe 9, 7, 8, 9, something in there, where God is looking at the Tower of Babel, and he was like, oh my God, if all these humans can work together like this, they could do anything. And the first order of business is, I gotta stop that shit. And he fucking crushes it. So, after that happens, there's this World War Zero. After God divides humanity against itself, after the Babel incident, there's a war there's a war that starts about taxes. There's a giant world war started right after the Tower of Babel about taxes. And then when the war is won, they introduce this character very briefly. He's a very obscure character called Melchizedek. War on taxes. Come on. It's the American sermon. Which is the King Dale, and he was returning from the slaying of the kings and the recovery of his brother. I don't know, brother, nephew, cousin. If you get into the episodes, you'll see. There's a joke there. And he gave him bread and zinc and blessed Abram. And he said, blessed be Abram, the most high God, possessor of heaven and earth. And he offered him tithes of all. So do I, my brother, in like manners, give you my blessing and raise my hand as did Melchizedek. And I crave from heaven the tithe of God and goodness upon you, and I point and sanctify you. Be thou a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek, virtuous, sincere, equitable, true, and temperate, minister of justice and priest of toleration. Be faithful to God, thy country, thy duty, and thyself, and thus deserve the term of sublime pontiff, or the Scottish mason, which you are hereafter entitled to wear. Told you this was going to be a long episode. So, in this rite, this drama, or this degree of Freemasonry, Philetus here becomes a Grand Pontiff associated with the king priest Melchizedek. So he is now merging the sons of fire and the sons of water, or the sons of light and the sons of dark, or the sons of Cain and the sons of Seth, the kingly and the priestly. So there is a lot of lessons here in this degree. And so in the weeks to come, we talk about Freemasonry and Cain, and Freemasonry, and we continue to talk about Freemasonry and Nimrod and the Tower of Babel, and we will discuss the idea of pre-Columbus discovery of America, especially by the Knights Templar, or at least the remnants of the Knights Templar after 1307. And we all know, this is probably my favorite, we all know that Columbus found the Bahamas when he was searching for a route to India. But we are going to put this whole thing in context, and we're going to figure out why a new route was needed. This is something that's missing from a lot of our, I don't know, elementary, middle school, high school textbooks, why a new route was actually needed. But I will give you a hint. I will give you a hint right here. You will have to wait. You'll have to wait for it. I'll give you a hint. It happened a la the sudden. And that's just the beginning of this new limited series, and I hope you guys will join me. And if you do, I hope you guys enjoy the show. I mean, the shows. I hope you enjoy both of the shows. I hope you will enjoy my two shows. I am John Towers, and this is the Abercast. Please search for the Abercast. It's called the Abercast, or it's called the Abercast, the American Sermon, the Occult Foundation of the United States. Search for it, find it. If you are having a problem, you can always just go to my website and get it there. I'm John Towers, and I'm out. I'm your head not architect. I'm not your head architect. I'm your head archaeologist for the evening, and I'm out. I hope you guys really love the show. Lots of awesome stuff. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you for your support. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. Got some things. Don't forget about the American Sermon. If you just listen to this episode and you're like, yo, I want more of the Abercast, go to your iTunes, your Stitcher, your whatever podcatcher that you use. If you can't find it on your pod app, you can go to abercast.com and it's streaming right there. Yeah, it's just launching. So any help, any support, any listens you can throw my way, the better. And I'd like if you could, let me know what you think about the whole thing. And hey guys, don't forget to play along with the Vessel of the Art giveaway. 5-star review. Tag a friend on Instagram that might like the show. Throw up your screen capture of your 5-star review on Instagram. Tag me, Stigmata Studios, and hashtag Vessel of the Art. You could do this for the Abercast and the American Sermon, or do for both of them. Increase your chances to win this beautiful Vessel of the Art. It's a brand spanking new smooth glass mason jar with the Abercast logo on it. Hashtag Vessel of the Art. Next time you whip up your weapon of mass distraction, next time you apply the formula and hook up your Jin Jihad, you could do it in this bad boy right here. We're going to do a drawing on this awesome jar on March 20th on what we're calling the Gin Joint. It's a Facebook Go Live. So you might want to check out the Abercast Facebook page. I believe it's going to be simulcast either on Instagram stories, which is also Stigmata Studios, or the Abercast YouTube page. It's going to be simulcast on one of those two places. If you don't like Facebook, I fucking totally understand that. So you might want to check us there. We'll be talking some shit. We'll be talking some bullshit, drawing the winner for the Vessel of the Art, and do some other fun stuff. We'll do some other fun stuff there. So join us there, please. Don't forget the website, abercast.com. Social media links are all down at the bottom, and there's a mailing list. Sign in right there so you get some free bonus content. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.